I know, it's taken me a while to get this video out, and I'm sorry. But you're probably wondering why it took me so long, and you see, basically what happened is... I took on the massive task of experiencing Elden Ring, beating its story, and going through the world of it, and I loved every second of it, even if I did get a little frustrated at times. But that's a part of it, is to get good. Now, if you've been on my channel for a little bit, you'll know that I've covered some of the earlier FromSoft games, and you'll notice that there's one in particular I haven't covered yet, and that's Dark Souls 2. And you might be asking why that is, and the actual reason is I am fucking terrified of that game. From the stories I've heard of it, it's the most unfair, has the worst runbacks to the bosses, and quite frankly, I wanted to experience all the other ones before playing that one. So, I played Elden Ring. So, with the world so massive, it makes you go, what is that? What do you got in your pocket there? No, you can show me.
What was that?
What is that? So I dove in very excited, and after about 100 hours later, I'm here to talk about it with you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Now, as soon as you start your playthrough, you are immediately shown this masterfully made cinematic that tells you that the Elden Ring has been shattered, and that whenever it was shattered, the shards of it went to certain demigods across the lands between, which is the setting in which Elden Ring takes place. Now, because of them each had a shard, not the actual whole ring, they fought each other in a massive battle, which was a stalemate no one actually won, leaving the lands between in ruin. Now, because of this, the Erd Tree needed someone to desperately put the Golden Order back, and release some of its grace to bring back Tarnished to hopefully reset it. Now, you were one of the Tarnished that was luckily touched by the grace and allowed back into the world. Your job is to now go all over the lands between, get all of the shards of the Elden Rings, kill the shard bearers, and restore the order. You are then put through kind of a tutorial cave. You kill your first boss, which is not even really a boss, it's just a normal guy with a health bar, and then you get let loose into the massive world and get called Maidenless by some guy wearing a mask. From here, the first half of the map is completely open to you, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can go wherever, you can explore wherever, and you should, because every crevice of this masterfully made map has something that you want. You absolutely get rewarded for exploring in this game, which is something that I am grateful for, because a lot of open world maps nowadays have the cluttered same mission over and over again, and while yes, it's very good to have an open world, you should have a reason for having it other than your game just being able to say, hey, we have an open world. I mean, we're looking at trinkets, armor, NPCs, spells, and just so many cool bosses to fight that are all optional to find, and you might not even experience them if you don't go look. Which, this is the main difference between Elden Ring and the earlier FromSoft games, is the absolute scale of the world and bosses. If you were to go back into 2017 and tell me while I was playing Dark Souls 3 that Elden Ring was even being conceived and like was a idea, I would lose my mind and then ask you who you are and why you're in my house. And I absolutely love the world building that FromSoft does time and time again, where the lore is not directly given to you and it's up to us, the fan base and players, to put it together through items and pictures and paintings and just all these different item descriptions. It's not directly told to you, which honestly, with how complicated and immense the lore is to this game, it needs to be that way. There is no way that we can get a 3-hour-long exposition from an NPC to update you on everything that has been happening. And while playing this game, I got so immense that I actually started watching lore videos while I was going to sleep. And I love them because they always start out like, okay, so today we're going to be talking about why Radon taking a dump led to the Great Depression in the 1920s. Now you may be asking, Cambry, what kind of build did you do? And the answer might be hidden in the subscribe and like button. No, but really that's a silly question to ask. Of course I did a strength build. I always do strength builds. Now I know I'm wearing a casting spells t-shirt that was actually a ploy for you to out yourself as a spellcaster. I've already turned a wizard into a cat already. With that being said, as I've only really done strength builds in Souls games, Elden Ring feels like I do need to go back and try different builds. Because playing with only a strength build is like experiencing 10% of the weapons, not even. I feel like I have so much more to go experience and play with and just go see the different playstyles. I did use other weapons here and there simply because not all the bosses cater to your playstyle, and I felt like I needed to use different weapons for different bosses, and that's really something that I loved, is there is a lot of openness to use different weapons, which I'll get to that later. But, for example, I got the Godskin Peeler, and now I want to go back and do a seppuku build with this weapon and see just how crazy the bleed is, because I absolutely fell in love with the moveset and just how quick it is. Shout out to my boy Aaron for putting me on that. You might also know him as Sheep Man. Now, the main weapon I used was the Giant Crusher, with the Grant Me Strength buff, as it allows you to get some diabolical numbers. Which brings me to the topic that I mentioned earlier, the openness of different builds. Now, especially whenever you're in the later games and you have a large number of ruins that you want to spend and maybe try out a different build, you absolutely can. And this is with the addition of the Twin Maiden Husk, where you can bring back bell bearings and buy kind of different smithing stones, glove warts, somber smithing stones, allowing you to really try any kind of weapon you want and immediately upgrade it to the stats that you need. Which, finding any of these bell bearings is completely optional and you don't have to do it. But oh my god, it makes the game so much easier. But you can try whatever build you want, really, and the game goes on for so long and has so much to do. I was able to level up my skills to a certain extent where I could do multiple builds at once. I leveled up my dexterity enough to use the Godskin Peeler, but I still had strength, so I could then still use the Giant Crusher, allowing me to use two different kind of build weapons at once, just because I could. Especially with the rebirth aspect from Renala, which you can just kind of change your stats. Which, oh my god, Renala's lore is so sad. Which brings me to the boss fights. Almost all of the boss fights feel like actual cinema, doing some of the coolest moves I've seen from any FromSoft game. Example, the Malekith second half of his boss fight, where he is doing moves like he is on crack cocaine and moving at the speed of a jet. The particle effects, the moves he's doing, the glowing on his sword, the cinematic halfway through is just an experience that you just have to play through. And it's not only the bosses themselves that are amazing looking, but also the arenas. I loved the arena of Godric the Grafted, who is surrounded by soldiers and dragons that are now a part of him because he feels it makes him more powerful. And I appreciated every one of them. The only boss fight that I have a little bit of a complaint about is the Fire Giant. And that is that the arena he's in will sometimes kind of mess up the fight. If he rolls into a rock and his foot is now inside of the rock and you can't clearly hit it, you kind of just gotta run away from him and wait for him to roll again. But that's really the only complaint I had. Other than this, however, I was completely immersed in the lore of the game, which is something I kind of mentioned earlier in the video, but I wanted to dedicate a whole section to it. This game has an immense amount of lore that I wanted to talk about because I mentioned it earlier. It has such deep and intricate characters along with armor sets and talismans that tell you the story of what's going on. For example, we all know of Malena and how hard she is to fight, but you figure out that she actually learned to fight through a talisman that tells you that a daughter of Ra was taught by a master mentor with a flowing blade, letting you know that she was taught by the Blue Dancer, which is so cool because it's depicted on a talisman and shows you the actual scene, allowing the players to realize that's why she fights like that and why her moves are so smooth is because she was taught by a Blue Dancer. Or the entire story of Rykard and the Lord Serpent that you will never know if you just don't go to the Fire Manor, and his hunger for power and how that affected and created an entire religion. It's just so cool. And these are just the side parts that you can optionally learn by looking at the item descriptions. The main parts that you learn from Melina whenever she's talking to you at a Grace is so gripping by itself. Genuinely, if you haven't played Elden Ring, or maybe you got halfway through it and had to restart like I did, because this is my first time actually beating the game, go through and push yourself to actually play through the entire game, experience everything it has to offer, because it's totally worth it. And after playing through it for the entirety for the first time, it is now my favorite FromSoft game. And I love it dearly. Up there with Dark Souls 3, which is in pretty high regards for me. So I think that's all I really wanted to say to everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful rest of your day. And remember to be kind to each other. And I'll see you next time.